Hey, you're watching Just Press Record on the Cultish Creative YouTube channel. I'm your host, Matt Ziegler, and on each episode, I invite not one, but two guests to join me for a conversation-style interview. These are smart, funny, usually a little eccentric, frequently a little weird, often very online friends of mine. And even if you don't understand what they have in common at first, just wait, because I've seen some common ground between them that I've been dying to ask them about, and just press record. The show practically named itself, seriously. So subscribe, like, comment below, and stick around at the end of the disclosures, disclaimers, and reminders. And, come find me, cultishcreative.com, at cultishcreative on Twitter, and by name on LinkedIn. Without further ado, throw your seatbelts on. Let's make it a record. Okay, I am pressing record now. Hello and welcome. You are watching Just Press Record on the Cultish Creative YouTube channel. I've got two marvelous guests joining me. I'm so excited for this conversation. I've been waiting for this for way too long. So first, my first guest, she's head over heels for Tush. And footnote, I'm specifically referencing a ZZ Top song, and I may ask you to retell that story. She's effectively the pit boss of marketing mosh pits, the spiked bracelet of ad copy facelifts, the Dr. Martin of solo career starting, and yes, the ass-kicking permissionista herself, Angie Colee. Say hello.
Wow. I'm stealing that intro, by the way. That is the best intro I have had by far.
I'm not going to lie. Ass-kicking permissionista.
Yes.
I mean, I'd probably wear that shirt.
Right?
I'd probably wear that
and
shirt.
the spiked bracelet. Oh, that's so great. That whole thing is so great.
Of ad copy facelifts?
Yes. Yes.
All right.
Everything about that. Brass knuckles in there somewhere too.
Yeah. We got them all in, and Doc Martens. But we don't just have Angie Colee. This is too much fun already. Now, this is very important. You got to watch the pronunciation here for me. It's the Nasdaq of exchange traded fun. He's a music nerd without being an old music turd, that's a level of curiosity that endears him to me automatically. The author of the Echo Beach blog, which kind of makes him the Echo and the Beachy man, I think. He is the futurist Davy Crockett of Spacely Spaces Sprockets, the Can You Dig It of Financial Widgets, Boys and Girls. It's the one and only Dave Nadig. Say hello, Dave.
Man, we just got to carry you around as our hype man. Like, I'm never going in the ring without you getting in front of me now.
Professional hype man for Matt. There we go.
I pledge to each of you I will show up, or I'll give you that clip. You can insert
if one
it
of
before.
us is actually going into the wrestling ring, you'll show up.
Yeah, I will just magically appear. It's going to be fantastic.
And then I'll trip and fall on my face. Show's over.
If only it were that easy. And it is. So the reason I wanted to have you guys both on to talk is I've been thinking a lot about this. And with so many of these Just Press Record episodes, this is the premise. I see something one of my friends says on social media, and I go, oh God, I have to tell this other friend this story. And that's basically where this one starts. Angie, you wrote a post that immediately is going to grab my attention about, and Dave, make sure we come back to her telling the story about why she loves the song Tush so much. You learned a lesson in a mosh pit. And can we please start there? Can you tell the story of what happened in the mosh pit that you wrote about?
Oh, goodness. Well, I have 3 mosh pit fight stories, but to go all marketer on you, I didn't learn a lesson in a mosh pit. What I learned was that I needed to own my story. And for a long time, I mean, obviously you're seeing this, I've got super red hair here. My piercings are visible. My tattoos are covered today, but a little bit of a rock and roll personality. Woohoo! And I just gave the aloha sign. There we go. Horns. I came into marketing, came into business thinking that I needed to be buttoned down, needed to be professional. I heard that my entire life growing up in South Texas. You need to be not quite so much. Chill out, put on a blazer. So I did. And I would show up to events and I would be, myself, but I never connected it until after the fact that the reason why I was struggling was because I was not myself. I was just this forgettable person trying to blend in. Until one day I'm at a marketing event. I had like one drink too many, got a little bit tipsy, and I still don't know to this day what brought the story up, but I told a story about getting into this mosh pit fight. And I literally watched people lean in and go like, who is this? I need to know more about you. How did I not know this about you? So fast forward, it began the great undoing, as I like to call it, where I started slowly coming out of my shell and just going, this is me. This is who I am. This is who you're going to be working with if we choose to work with. So why surprise? Like, you've hired this professional. Surprise. I drop F-bomb. Started revealing it and done a lot of work to get really comfortable with who I am front facing with my business and everything. And I had 2 instances in short order that led to this post that I made. One where I had a short sleeve thing, but it showed my tattoos in the headshot. And they chose to edit a tasteful blazer, tweed blazer, right? Not even a black one. I think if they'd put a black one on me, I would have been just fine. But they put a tweed blazer on me via Photoshop and a tasteful necklace. I have a screenshot of it. And when I went back to that, like I waffled back and forth, is it even worth it raising hell over a photo? Ultimately decided, yeah, I need to say something because this has been a long journey to being comfortable with who I am. Permission to Kick Ass is my brand. Hello, tweed blazer. Talk about a disconnect. And then so I raised a little bit of hell. They decided to go nuclear and take the entire podcast episode down, to which I went, all right, cool. You obviously don't get it. That's fine. And then a couple months later, I wrote a story for another outlet. They sent it to me for review before publication, and they had modified something where I told a story about getting in a mosh pit fight, the one that I just told you. I was at a marketing event. I started to realize I had a unique and identifiable brand in this moment, and they had sanitized it to something along the lines of, and then she had an important lesson at a rock show. And I went, that's not what I wrote. I wrote that I learned something about myself after I told a story about a mosh pit fight. That is 3 very particular words that have a very different connotation from at a rock show. I actually never heard back from them after I pushed back on them. And I'm always super polite when I reach out to people like that. Like, maybe this was an oversight or maybe this was an editor getting a little bit too enthusiastic, but that's not what I said. So yeah, that's what I learned. That a lot of people are still very uncomfortable with the bright hair, the tattoos, the swearing, the rock shows, the fights at rock shows, which were always self-defense. I do not start them, but like my good Southern mama said, I will finish it. There you go.
Dave, I'm really curious, and especially
I
about
just
like,
want to hear more about this. I want to know what the show was.
there you go. There's a great question. Who was the
I
band?
want to know what the show
Do you
was that
know?
you were in the fight in.
2 of them were actually at the same show. It was Trespass America in Los Angeles. I know Pop Evil was there. I know Trivium was there. That was the most violent pit I have ever been in anywhere near. And there's like 3 basic rules of mosh pits, right? Like, tell me if I'm wrong here. If they want in, let them in. If they want out, let them out. And if they fall down, pick them up. Like, that's the basic mosh pit etiquette for anything. So the first fight I got into at Trespass America was I'd had enough in the pit and I was trying to leave, and there had been like a crowd crush. So I just want to go outside and get some air. And these 3 big dudes, like, I'm 5'5". I'm not a tall woman. They've all got a foot on me. They locked arms and tried to keep me in the pit. I had a drumstick in my hand and I started wailing on one of them. It's like, this is not going to work. They broke and they let me out. But it was like a dick move. Why did they try to keep me in when I didn't want to be in? That's just dumb. The second one was at the same show. I had the drumstick. I had caught it for my friend's daughter. This explains some of my actions later on that don't make sense. The daughter is 12 years old and she really likes this band. So I'm holding onto this drumstick. I'm at the edge of the pit. I'd gotten knocked and I accidentally let go of the drumstick. And without thinking about it, I went in after it and I got rolls. And so I fell down. I grabbed it. I'm being picked up by the crowd, according to the rules, right? And I've got one hand on it. They've got their hands under my arms. I'm kind of being picked up like this. And some guy comes over and grabs the stick and tries to yank it out of my hand. At which point I double down because they're just picking me up, right? I'm like, I'm not letting go of this drumstick. This is mine. It's going to that little girl. Okay. He sucker punched me in the face to try and get me to let go of it. At which point I held on with one hand, let go with the other, and started I was so angry. And I had a good friend at the time who was at the show with me who, tell me if you've got good friends like this. She saw what was happening. She decided, Angie's punching this guy. I should punch him too. Clearly he did something. And so eventually the crowd around us realizes there's two women just wailing on this dude who's just trying to cover himself. And it's loud and it's chaos and there's bodies moving all around. So the guys nearest us are kind of screaming like, what happened? And I just like shrieked, he punched me in the face. He got picked up and taken off. I have no idea what happened. But yeah, suffice it to say, all of you who are scared by the big, scary metalheads, they're usually some of the nicest people and most protective people that you will ever meet. I got punched in the face in a mosh pit and that guy got dragged off for mosh justice.
Well, here's the mosh justice. Dave, I'm really curious. I want to ask a little bit about just like personality and what you bring to work, but I also need to know because you have full on seen your fair share of mosh pits in the day.
Sure.
Wait, wildest. First off, wildest. Like, what's the wildest mosh pit you've ever seen?
The wildest mosh pit I've ever been in had nothing to do with a punk show. It was actually the Young Dubliners concert, which is a
where'd you see them though?
Band.
Yeah.
Sort of Celtic rock band. But in the 90s, they had a brief window when they were younger. Now they play like Celtic festivals. But
right.
In the 90s, I was at a concert at Slim's in San Francisco with my soon-to-be wife, who was a big Young Dubliners fan and just had heard like their CD, which was, slightly rocky Irish Celtic music, but nothing untoward. And then we went to Slim's and it was not remotely like any of the recordings anybody had ever heard. It was a full on, at least 2x speed punk show version of this. And so it was a bunch of young Irish punks who all showed up, got really, really drunk. And my wife just wanted to get to the front. She was absolutely enamored with this. So we pushed to the front of the mosh pit, sort of like me protecting her like this, not that I'm very big. To get her so that she would be right at the stage, as it were. And for about 2 hours, I stood there like with my arms around her and I was black and blue from my entire back afterwards because of the number of elbows I caught, just trying to protect my fiance from the stage. So that's definitely the most injured I've ever gotten. And it wasn't even in a punk show. But you're right. I think that the truth about most music subgenres is when you get to those people in their scene, yes, they're protective of it because it's something that's important to them, but they're also protective of the scene, of the community. And I found that just absolutely over and over and over again. So that rings very true to me.
Wait, stay on this for a second. When you think about in that terms, protective of a scene in a productive way, like give me from your own musical history, your own experience. What's like a scene you think of as like the epitome of protective in a positive way?
I mean, like going to DIY shows, like that's what it always feels like. You're in somebody's house, no matter how run down and show house the house is. There's this sense that like, no, you're in a house show. You don't like trash the bathroom, right? You don't like, eat all the food in the fridge without asking, if there's not a sign up, et cetera. And there's, I don't know, I've always just had that sense that the smaller the environment, both the cooler it tends to be, but also the more into building and protecting that community things seem to be. When you go to, I don't know, I just saw a dive at the TD Garden in Boston, and that's 20,000 people who've never heard of this band because they're just opening for Depeche Mode. I went to go see Dive.
And I saw them open for Depeche Mode too. Outstanding.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
way better than Depeche Mode, at least on the show I saw. And like for that opener, there were like 700 people down on the floor that really cared about being there for that band, and they really wanted people to like enjoy it as much as they did. But then as soon as there's 20,000 people, then people are just assholes again. Then you're dealing with the public, and the public is terrible.
What do you think about that, Angie? Like musically first, and then you can take it broader if you want. But small. Is Dave right? Is it the smaller scene that wants to like protect itself? And is there a particular musical band genre or show where you're like, they upheld the mosh pit rules all the way through?
I think, most of the shows that I've been to are bigger ones, but I think you've got those purists, those protective people at every show of every size. It was funny that you mentioned like protecting your wife because that third story that I mentioned involves protection. The little girl that I had caught the drumstick for, and this is relevant to what you said, Matt, I promise it all ties in. The little girl I had caught the drumstick for heard all of these stories that we were talking about, all of our adventures at rock shows, and wanted to go with us. And we went like, all right, obviously, absolutely not going to any bars or any of these indoor shows where it's pure chaos. Let's go to one of the bigger shows with headliners, multi-day festival. We can be out on the lawn away from the chaos so that she gets to see what this is like, get the atmosphere in, but she's not in any danger of taking hits, right? So lo and behold, the drunkies set up camp next to us, and two of them started talking to each other, and eventually they're threatening each other, and the crowd broke into a big circle around them like it does. And this girl's mom and I, my friends, we are yelling at these guys to break it up, take it away from there's families here. Y'all need to go somewhere else. One of them jumps the other. They wind up rolling around on the ground, and they rolled into the little girl and knocked her down. At which point my friend and I charged straight down the middle. She knocked one to the ground. I put one in a headlock, and we're just like screaming at everybody around there to help us break it up. And that's when the big guys charged in and we're like, break it up. And we started screaming at them too. Like, way to go. You waited for the women to jump in and break this up. But
Thanks.
this ties into the protective thing later, because after we gave those big guys a lot of grief for their delay in stepping in, they built a spot up on the fence line so that this little girl could have a view of the show. And they built a little protective wall around all of us so that we can enjoy the show without taking hits from the people on the lawn. And I just thought that that was so cool. I mean, we kind of had to fight for that protection a little bit and show them that we were there and we were serious about it. But once we did, they were all in on protecting it. So yeah, I think there are people like that at every show. Like, they want you to enjoy it. They want you to understand this kind of culture, which is a little bit abnormal, right? Taking hits, slamming into each other. But they try not to let it go too far.
Do either of you go to big festivals still? Like, I mean, like Lala or anything like that?
I haven't been to one in a minute. I think the last one I went to was Welcome to Rockville in Florida.
Yeah, it's to me, that's a very different scene.
Yes.
And it's one that I feel like this is now I get to be the curmudgeon, get off my lawn, dude. But I feel like those environments are now, they feel very selfish. Most of the people that I run into at those kind of big events where it's like entirely about that person's individual experience and they don't give a crap about anybody else. So it's all just shoving to the front and getting their phones out. And, in the back of my head, I'm going like, these people aren't here for the music, all that garbage. But that is such a different environment. I went to Boston Calling last year, mostly to see the Foo Fighters finally go back on stage. And it was a great experience. And I saw some phenomenal shows, but it kind of made me realize that I may just be overseeing these mass shows where everybody's there for the photograph or the video and not particularly there to listen to the music or to dance.
Mm-hmm.
Angie, what do you think about like the mass show experience? Like what is it about that many people? You get them all together. Like, why is that not as pure an experience? I'm not saying that in some weird purist way, but this is interesting.
I think just because you have like crowd and mob dynamics at play there too. And if you've been to any event or if you know people who do like event planning, event management, you know that like crowd control is always a big concern, and it can turn like that and people get hurt and people get killed. So I think that there's part of that like there's just this energy that it's hard not to get swept up in, especially if you happen to be near the wrong person at the wrong time. But I've been to a lot of smaller shows too, and I still go to big shows. Like the last big show I would say that I went to is probably, this might or might not surprise you. It was the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. They sell out arenas and their shows are incredible, and it is a metal band and an orchestra, and they usually do covers of like Beethoven and Christmas music and stuff. It's fantastic. But that I also get to sit in a seat and enjoy because I'm in my 40s now. We're not on the mosh pit line taking hits anymore. The recovery time is way, way higher than it was in my 20s when I was getting in those fights. So there you go.
Yeah, the risk reward's just not there anymore for me.
No, it's definitely not. Dave, same thing. Like the mob dynamics, like as the group gets bigger, is that just it? Is it just not as much fun to be in that audience to you?
Well, I mean, I'm a weird person to ask because I have like weird neurodivergent social.
This is why I'm asking you. This is why,
for
I want this
me,
insight.
if any group of people more than 8 is already a challenge, unless I'm the one on stage presenting or performing. So being in an environment with 300 people or 30,000 people is not that different for me. It takes a level of, me getting comfortable, and often I will end up bailing out of things because, if they're not amazing, my anxiety level overwhelms the awesomeness, and then it's not fun for me anymore. So my favorite way to experience music is playing it in the house with, ideally maybe 50 people tops who are there for a house show, and you're just doing crappy covers of 90 songs with a bunch of old guys. Like, that's my favorite way of experiencing music, is to be on the fringe of making it. I don't need to be the center of attention. I just like to be part of the process. But then from there, like, my favorite place to see music is the West Bowl Music Bowl in Connecticut, which is, I don't know, maybe 2,000 people, but it's so spread out. It's an old tennis facility. And so it's only maybe 60 rows deep, but it's in a big bowl, and you never feel like you're in a giant crowd. You always feel like you're right on top of the performers. And that's like, I feel like there are a lot of venues like that are really phenomenal. The kind of venues I used to go to, in the 90s, which were much more like 300 to 600 person venues, like speaking locally, like the Middle East in Boston or something like that, or the Roxy in New York. I don't think those are really for me anymore, because those big GA spaces can get to be just hyper crowded, just a hyper press. And often you can't even hear the music, right? That's the other thing I find in those kinds of spaces, is that if you're 70 back in a GA floor, mostly what you hear is the people around you. So pretty rare I'll go to one of those.
Angie, what do you think about the way Dave just said that, like being on the fringe of making it? I feel like this is probably one reason why the three of us can have this conversation, because we've all made some form of ruckus in our life with music attached to it.
I like that. Yeah. I had a blues band for a long time back then, and I would say the same thing. I've had people ask me why I didn't do like covers or try to make a serious go of it. And I was like, it's just fun for me. It's something that I do to add more richness to my life, to have more stories. Um, like the one that you asked me to tell about Tush. I also have a great one about why I won't sing Hotel California. And I usually listen, or like if I hear the opening chords of that, I will turn it off. The people that know me know that story. I think this is the first time I would publicly tell that one, but that one's available for you, and it comes from a small venue if you're interested.
Well, tell us that story. All I'm thinking, I'm in my mind, it's the Wayne's World scene where he walks into the store and sees the Strat, and he goes to pick it up, and he plays one note, and the guy, no stairway, and the no stairway sign is on the wall. Like, we need to get you one for Hotel California.
For Hotel California.
Yeah.
Mine was slightly more colorful. It was at a dive bar here in the Houston area in Texas. This is the first bands that I had ever played with. We're doing Hotel California. It's fantastic. The crowd is loving it, particularly this young, like if you ever watched Golden Girls, picture Sophia Petrillo in a hot pink velour jumpsuit, drunk as a skunk, who takes the musical break to get up on stage and use me like a stripper pole while enjoying the solo. And the guitarist is like side-eyeing me, and I'm like, what's going on? So I say into the mic, like, hey, sweetheart, there are 5 men on this stage. Feel free to share. Like, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can share the love. She stuck to me like cracked sticks to Velcro that entire rest of the song. And I was just like, all right, cool. Well, I have this like little old drunk lady mental association with California now. I hope wherever she is, she's been having a blast this entire time, because clearly she was having the time of her life that night.
Dave, you got any good covering a song story that you...
My Eagles story is that my cover band won't touch an Eagles song. One of the people, like, there are some bands that people have very strong opinions about it. So it's a little bit like Big Lebowski. It's like, no, fucking Eagles, man.
What is it about? And so you mentioned like playing like in a house and playing like 90 songs. What is it about being on the fringe of making something that somebody else made? It's not necessarily an original piece, but you're giving an original take for a small group of people who are there to appreciate that original thing. What is that?
I love playing covers largely because it's well understood territory, right? And if it's a song that I love, I learn about music by learning how to play a song that I love because it helps me understand why I love it as much as I do. So I've always enjoyed that process of taking apart songs. Like one of my favorite things to do is to rebuild songs in Ableton, not to ever have anybody else look at, but if I want to understand something, I'll like break down all the parts and read the sheet music and like rebuild, the opening to, last one I did was a bunch of Talking Head songs, right? I'm never going to play those live. I don't have a synthesizer that I can take on the road. I'm
That's
also like a
ambitious.
50-year-old dude who's not going to ever be a musician for a living. But I love that process of teasing apart a song. We were lucky enough for a couple of years when we were playing, more than once a year. We actually had a couple people in our band who actually write some pretty cool songs, and that's a great experience too. But I don't think I have the chops as a musician to be particularly helpful in the process of workshopping a song. Like I can play along and it's like, okay, here's the chord structure, but I'm not the guy who's going to be like, what if we did a 10-bar bridge? Right. I'm not that guy.
I have a question, a curiosity based on what you just said. So when you do covers, are you a purist or are you an improv guy?
No,
Like,
because I'm as autistic as I am, I start by trying to learn everything note for note. And there are a few songs that I've done it for. I once learned the entire Edge line for One by U2, like every part of the solo, all the effects changes and everything. We've got like one good recording of it that was fine. So I enjoyed that process, but mostly we would do songs loosely based on base or loosely based on the originals, often mashed up with other songs just for the hell of it. So like quite a few times we would play War Pigs and all of a sudden be playing something else by the time we were done, things like that.
Which is a fantastic practice. Angie, what about you? Are you a purist or are you
um,
a improv?
I'm more of an improv. I mean, I think the blues musician gives it away. One of the reasons that I gravitate toward the blues, one, because there's a lot of like sassy female singers in the blues scene. Candy Kane comes to mind. She's got this fabulous song called I'm the Reason Why You Drink. And it's not what you think. If you listen to the lyrics, I encourage everybody to look it up. It's because every time the hypothetical you, turns around, she fills your glass. So you're drinking more than you think you're drinking. It's a very fun song. But also because the song is never really the same. And I really enjoyed that dynamic because as the lead singer, I was more like the conductor and I would like mix it up and be like, all right, harmonica solo first this time. All right, drum solo, do a drum solo. Come on, bass, jump in here. And we would sometimes have like 10, 15-minute long versions of the same song if the crowd is really feeling it. And my harmonica player's wife, Diane, I'm going to send this to you. She used to make fun of me on our covers of Sweet Home Chicago. If you ever saw the Blues Brothers, he does math. One and one is 2 inches 4. Sometimes I would mess it up because like I'm just not paying attention. I'm in the moment and I'm singing and I'd say something like 1 and 1 is 10. So she would sit there in the crowd and throw numbers at me. And I remember like I'm not going to throw them, but I remember throwing up 2 particular fingers and going 1 and 1 is 2 while locking eyes with her on stage. So that was fun. And then when I did get a little bit like I think every musician gets antsy and wants to mix things up every once in a while. I auditioned for an 80s hair metal cover band. I thought it was going to be great. They had a picture of Steel Panther in the ad and I'm like, yes, I'm going to get my gem makeup on. We're going to have zebra striped pants. Like this is
Great
going to be
reference.
fun.
Yeah.
We're going back. And I nailed the audition. I got in and I remember one of our first rehearsals. This is in Northern California. This will be relevant in a second. We're rehearsing. We're in the middle of Panama by Van Halen and the guitarist. And these are all supremely talented guys. They can play this note perfect. Van Halen, note perfect. Insane. He stops me right after a verse and goes, right there. Dave goes like he corrected my run. And I went, I'm pretty sure they will not mistake me for David Lee Roth. It's like he and I got into it in the middle of it. He's like, people come to these shows to hear their favorite songs played like they would hear it on the record. And I said, well, then they can stay home and listen to the record. If they're coming for live music, they're coming for the show. They're coming for us to make it our own. And I'm not talking about like turning it into a completely different genre. I'm going to do honor to this song. It's iconic, Panama by Van Halen. But I'm not going to study this and do note perfect, because then I can't enjoy the music. I'm focusing on, did I nail that note? Did I nail that riff? And it changes the experience. So I wound up leaving the band after that first rehearsal, because I was like, we don't have the same viewpoint of this. And it turns out, to bring it full circle, that picture of Steel Panther, he was from Peru, a Googler, and did not realize that he had picked a picture of Steel Panther. He just Googled 80s hair metal band and picked the first image that looked appropriate. And I had to explain to him, then you need to take that picture down, because I came to this audition with a very different perspective on what we were trying to do.
The ultimate false advertising
Yes.
lesson.
At least he didn't get a picture of Spinal Tap, because Nadig really would have been disappointed.
If he had Stonehenge, you would know you're with your people. Dave, what is it about the audience? And I know I'm dancing around this thing, but there's something about when you're covering a song, you're improvising, you're stretching the bounds of the song, and actually reading the room too. You can't just be totally absorbed in your head. There has to be a broader awareness than just you. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, you're giving me credit for being too good a musician, right? So I'm absolutely a punter and rhythm follower on these kinds of things. But the experience that I had where that was the closest was we played a friend's wedding. And we did a whole set, and it was great. And we played songs people could dance to in the whole 9 yards. But having never played a wedding or an environment like that, we did not count on the sort of asymptotic inebriation level of particularly the sorority girls who were there for the bride. So by the time we'd gotten 2/3 of the way through our set, they just assumed that this was live band karaoke. And we had hordes of young women coming up demanding that we play songs that we're all in our phones going I've never played the song in my life, but it's the same 4 chords as every other song we play, so we'll figure it out. And some of us literally had not even heard some of these songs before. So we're looking at each other being is this in 4/4? What just happened? And it was my favorite performance experience ever, because we had all of these drunk women from the audience coming up and just belting. Some of them were good, some of them were terrible. But in terms of reading the audience, I think it's always important to remember anything that you're making that's going to be seen by another human being is co-created, right? You're only a tiny piece of it, right? If you're not in the head of the person who's consuming it at the same time, you're missing the whole point, right? As much as I mostly play music for myself, the act of creation for an audience is very, very different.
What do you think about that, Angie? The act of creating for an audience, you're co-creating as soon as you do it in publicly. What does that remind you of? What's that make you think of?
I would absolutely agree, because all I'm imagining is kind of that tension that happens and I've been in a situation like this before, when I was a newer performer and a little bit of ego got involved, but somebody at one of these dive bars came up on stage and tried to sing with me, and I was like, and you can feel that tension. Now we're not having fun anymore. We're competing. I'm trying to get the bartenders and the bouncers on my side. That's ruining this guy. He may have been out of line. He may not have been out of line. I could have misread things. There's just this, all of a sudden the energy has taken a turn for the worse. And I distinctly remember that night where I was just so upset that in my defense, he smelled like he had just barfed all over himself. I did not want him on the stage for multiple reasons. But I remember that it was my energy that changed the entire dynamic of the show, because I would not allow that. I could not co-create with somebody like that. And so I don't know.
Well, you're taking it much more literally than I meant it. I meant it more existentially.
No, but there's a fascinating, the through line of that is the self-management and the crowd management, and not dictating what the crowd's going to do. The crowd's going to do what the crowd's going to do. If you're playing a wedding to a bunch of, inebriated college people, that's going to be a different vibe than playing, the cocktail hour or something at the retirement party or whatever.
Well, and there was another instance of co-creation that I didn't expect. It was before I had joined a band, but one of my good girlfriends knew I wanted to sing, but was a little bit shy about getting on stage. So she plied me with booze and took me to Howl at the Moon, a dueling piano bar, on open mic night. And so I'm up there, I'm singing Superstition and having a grand old time. This is in Los Angeles. And a bunch of guys with cases walk in the door, and the piano player looks at me and he goes, "Keep going." They pulled out their horns. They jump up on stage. We wind up doing like a 15, 20-minute long rendition with lots of repeated verses of Superstition. Everybody's having fun.
Amazing.
And it turns out that was the horn section from Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. In 2007, they'd hit curfew at the Gibson Amphitheater and were looking for a place to continue playing. And everybody told them Howl at the Moon. So like serendipitous. Like, and if I had been intimidated and been like, well, now I have a horn section and it's not open mic, like that's an instance of creation gone great.
Dave, have you ever found yourself on stage with, I'm sure, like Cherry Pop and Daddies or something? Sure, they walked into one of your house.
No, but I was thinking there is the, to me, there's always the sense that I know I'm the worst musician in the room. Like whether or not I am at any given moment, right? That is always what, like the place that I'm going in. And Matt, you and I talked a little bit about this, but like I just had this experience of being in Scotland, and my wife had arranged for us to be staying at a pub during their Celtic session night, and arranged for us to be sitting right next to the guy who had the spare guitar. Like she set the whole thing up so that it was spontaneous.
I love it.
But that was one of those weird experiences where I'd never done that sort of Celtic session thing where every person leads a song and you go around in a circle. And so it was like fine. It's all very simple music and I can keep the rhythm just fine. And but nobody's spectacular, right? This is just a bunch of locals who are showing up, and it's glorious and wonderful and exactly how making music should be. And then we get to this young woman. The average age here is probably 60. We get to this young woman who's maybe 25, and she just opens up and is basically Amy Winehouse in the room, just freaking destroys, like unamplified. We're all trying to keep up. I can't remember what song we were playing, but she just crushed it so hard. Oh, and then the next song was this kid whose name was also Dave. He was Davey, who was like 18 and had just started learning how to play guitar and did not want to sing. And so the dichotomy of going from somebody who was clearly a talent to this kid who just wanted to make music, and he ended up playing American Girl, and he did a great job with it. But there is something about playing in a group where you know that there's this huge discrepancy there. I find that quite hard, right? I find that quite difficult.
Why, Angie, is that like that humility, that like onstage humility? Because you said you didn't have it quite at first. You had the whole like, no, I am the authority. I've been given the mic. I am the lead singer. Like this is an autocratic decision in one way only.
Oh man, it's interesting because I would say, like, at the risk of sounding slightly egotistical, I come at this from the other end of the spectrum. I'm usually one of the more talented musicians, and have just been like, I taught myself to sing harmonies when I was a kid, and I would listen to songs over and over and over again until I could sing each individual harmonic line like at will. Right. And I've had people like accuse me of being a ringer and try to show people up and like trying to ruin their fun because I'm just there and I happen to be good. So I don't know. It's an interesting experience. And I don't ever take that personally. I'm like, I'm just here trying to have fun too. And if you're taking it personally, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not going to like
karaoke.
Make myself. I do go to karaoke and I get accused of the same thing.
You are, but then you are a ringer. If you show up to karaoke and you just crush, I'm like the people calling you a ringer.
Karaoke is for fun. Like, if you're up there having fun or you're trying, I'm celebrating you. Like, if you're up there being a jerk, oh God. Yeah. Karaoke. I've got so many of those good stories too.
What? In both of these cases, in both of these stories, whether you come in as the most humble person in the room or you come in with I'm going to say a confident awareness, because I don't believe you're bringing the ego into this thing where you're like, let me come stomp. Yeah. Let me come stomp on these with my diva boot of justice. I think both of you look at that as like seeing the room as the room, or seeing the other players on the stage as the players, and go like, hey, we're all in this together. Like, how do we make this one thing better? Dave, when you're in Ireland and you're at this thing, I gotta feel like that the whole room is just, how do we make this night? How do we make this thing just feel awesome?
And there is a definite difference between that kind of what I would call collaborative creating and the more competitive kind of creating. And I've been, with an instrument in my hand in both of those environments. For me, I vastly prefer the more collaborative version, even though it generally means that you're working at the lowest common denominator of the, group of people you've got with you. Right. So in my case, it tends to be finding a drummer. Like that always seems to be the challenge. Everything else we seem to be able to cover.
Drummers are a challenge. We can all agree.
Kind of music, you're probably just playing that.
Mm-hmm.
What about Angie? Same thing for you. Like this, I love this. Did you say collaborative creating versus competitive creating?
Competitive. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like, I mean, to take the example of karaoke, I'm actually like, I'm a good singer. I'm also much more intimidated by karaoke than I am by live music. To me, live music
Oh
is
hell
much more
yeah.
forgiving, especially since most people don't have this stuff memorized the way that I do, like when I'm practicing lines over and over and over again. Whereas at karaoke, they're usually listening to the studio recorded version of this with the words on the screen, and almost like even people that can't carry a tune in a bucket know that Mariah has a riff right there. Or like, this is the way that, oh, she missed that note. That was supposed to sound like this, right? So there can be like, at least me in my neurosis and over, analyzing that. I'm like, I'm worried I'm going to mess it up when they know that that wasn't the note I was supposed to hit. Whereas when I'm with the band, I'm like, oh, I didn't hit that note. Cool. We're going to make it into a run and we're going to take a new verse here. Let's go.
Dave, are you a karaoke person?
I love karaoke. I don't sing. I sing terribly, and I love singing. And nobody's ever going to put me in the front of a band, but I am definitely one of those people who will get up there and do something embarrassing at the top of my lungs. I have about a 11 half note range, so I can do some Oasis. I can do some light rap. I can do a little Joy Division. That's about it.
Oh,
You can do Oasis?
Like the range, most Oasis songs are like 7 notes.
But the vowels, how does one possibly? I actually would regard as not like karaoke terrifies me. I don't know why. I could get up and do whatever in front of a group. I hate the idea of that. I think for the reason you said, Angie. But yeah, the Oasis vowels I find horrifying to ever even attempt, like singing along with the radio to Oasis.
But
It's just
I
like,
see for me, knowing that I'm going to suck going in, like there's no chance anybody is going to hear me sing a song at karaoke, and I'm going to come off stage and they're going to pat me on that, being like, "That was great." It's never happened. It will never happen. But that's part of why I do it, is because I know it's fundamentally a comedy performance, and most of the people in the audience at a karaoke bar are pretty ready for.
Yes. Oh God, I have such a great, like one of my favorite karaoke memories was at a business event. Actually, they had rented out the whole venue and it was so a bunch of business owners and entrepreneurs doing karaoke. And he knew his crowd. He pulled a chair up on stage and he sat it backwards and he sat down very dramatically with the microphone. And then tequila starts playing. And we all just laughed and everybody's doing the Pee Wee Herman dance. And then as soon as it comes up to that part, tequila, everybody screams it to the roof. So that was a lot of fun.
That's a great karaoke play.
But I love doing karaoke with business people and stuff like that. I mean, for years in the ETF industry, we used to do karaoke at the Southern California event that was always happening. And like for 6 or 7 years, we did karaoke at the same gay bar in Laguna Beach. And it was phenomenal. And it was all these people from the industry that you would never expect to show up. And, I remember Jim Ross from State Street Global Investors singing Achy Breaky Heart. And it was one of my favorite things I've ever seen in my life. And like those kinds of things I think are really unique to making music,
What is it about like the leveling field of that? So I'm actually really intrigued by this. Like here's a bunch of business people like out of their element doing something like this collectively together where they actually know they can be bad. Because all these people are going to go to work and none of them are going to do something at work that is objectively karaoke level.
But there's something empowering about that, like permission to fail, like to go into this and to just have fun with it, no matter how good or bad it is. I like that. I think that's the magical part of karaoke, when I'm out of my head and can just have fun with it.
Yeah, I wish there were more opportunities for that in sort of modern society. I mean, the closest things I can think of are like, the places where you go and drink wine and paint pottery. Like those are things, nobody cares what the pottery looks like. That's not the point. Just like nobody cares what the song sounds like in karaoke. I don't feel like there are enough of those anymore. And I think in music in particular, this is my high horse to get on. I hate the fact that my kids and their generation, their Zoomers, almost all of them that I talk to about music, if they have an opinion, it's like, well, yeah, I want to play guitar because I want to be in a touring band and I want to, it's a career thing. Like the money to creativity line seems to be so firmly entrenched in American culture. And I think that's awful. Like in my house, that was never the way it was. There's instruments in every room in this house, and every one of my kids and all their friends learned how to play something just to bash stuff around after dinner. And that feels really rare. There's very few parents I know that make music with their kids.
Mm.
Angie, what do you think about like the money to creativity line? And maybe the part of this is just like making noise for no paycheck, like just because it's fun to make noise.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like we've got activity and information crammed into every spare second, where I think we were all fortunate enough to grow up in an era where there wasn't that kind of noise in our childhood, our early adulthood. You just kind of had to fill that space, and music is such a great way to fill space, right? And now there's just, I'm trying to articulate this on the fly, so I don't even know how it's going to come out of my head, but like there's no space. And so to fit the music in, it has to take the place of something else. And I think a lot of people are equating that with, well, okay, well, if it's got to take up space, then it should be making me money. And that is a shame. That's a shame.
That's interesting, Dave, about like not forcing to create the space with like the kids or having the musical instruments. Like I grew up in a house where there was just musical instruments around.
Right.
Like it was just one of those things. We had the piano in the living room. We had, after my brothers and I started playing, there was always a drum set and a bunch of leftover instruments in the basement. And it was just, oh, I'm bored. I don't have a phone or an iPad. If I don't want to watch the same thing on TV again or watch the ball game with dad, I'm going to go in the basement and just mess around. What do you think about like creating that intentional space with nothing else attached and here, figure these strings out?
I just think it's hard. I think it's hard to do that in the modern world. I think, it's hard just in terms of space, actually. I mean, to be blunt, like I think people are living in smaller and smaller spaces largely.
Yeah.
And that makes it challenging. But like I think about my daughter who's off on her own now, and she's in her mid-20s and she plays music and she's, in a bunch of different projects. Space is the number one problem, right? It's like, where are we going to rehearse? Where are we going to, like, who's got a drum kit? And so she, like I think a lot of people in her generation, migrate towards electronic music because it's a thing you can cram in the smallest amount of space, right? It's like, give me a DJ deck and an Ableton push and I'm done. And I get it. And I think that's part of why we see so much creativity coming out of bedroom pop. But at the same time, I don't think it's a replacement for, a big old living room full of a lot of acoustic instruments that make a lot of jangly noise.
Mm-hmm.
You know the Depeche Mode story or the theory about them, why they played electronic music? So they tell this story about, I forget if it's a Martin Gore story or what, but it's like, we were watching all these rock bands and we wanted to play shows, but we had to only get to places on a train. So like, what do you do when you have to go to play a gig and you have to get on a train and you can't drive?
Right.
Like you better put a keyboard that you can plug direct on your back. And that becomes how you have a band. And that's kind of the premise. And the sidebar to that, only because with the passing of Steve Albini, the drummer for Big Black, does anyone remember his name? This is a horrible music joke. His name was Roland because he was a Roland drum machine.
Oh my God.
But he got full credit. Angie, tell us the story. Tell us what happened with Tush. I think if I miss this, I'm going to regret it. And Dave,
we've been teasing this now for 50 minutes. I got to hear this story.
Yeah, we got to get to it.
Well, I've hinted at this a little bit. I'm a good singer, but also an anxious singer and have to work really hard to get out of my head. It took a lot of convincing on a lot of people's parts just to get me to audition for a band. And I was terrified. I'm going to blow the notes. I'm going to forget the words. I'm going to make a jerk of myself on stage. Like, this is going to be the most embarrassing thing I ever do. So I auditioned for a band, and my audition was like 4 live songs, and it was a cattle call audition. Like, each of us were doing a 4-song set. I forgot the words to the first 2 songs, and each time the guitarist kind of like side-eyed me, and then he would jump in and sing, and then I'd jump in on harmony, like, not a big deal. I totally meant to do that. So somehow I got this gig, and a few months later, we're playing a set at a divey dive bar here in Houston. And, you end the set with a high energy song, leave it on a high note so that we can take a break and we can come back and amp it up some more, right? High song was Tush by ZZ Top. Very, very fun to sing with a deep, raspy voice like I have. I'm wearing a cute, flirty skirt and some high heels. I tell people, hey, we'll be back in like 15 minutes. Get off the stage, realize I've left my purse and my drink up there, turn around, try to step up onto the stage, proceed to wipe out. Remember the skirt? Yeah, that came up over my hind end and I wound up flashing my butt to everybody in the room. And you could kind of hear the collective inhale of like, oh my God, is she okay? They don't know how to react. And in that moment, I just had this clarity that I still don't know where it came from. I was like, if this show stops, it's because of me. It's because I can't handle this right now. What do I do? The show is on my back right now. Literally, my backside. So I stood up and I still don't know where this came from. I was like, well, I guess I can't sing Tush without showing you mine. We'll be back in 10 minutes. And I got off the stage. And that was the moment, like I condensed that a little bit, but my worst fears all came true. I embarrassed the crap out of myself and the show still went on and it was such a memorable part of the show. I don't know if this is coming up on 20 years later, if anybody from that dive bar remembers the night that I wiped out and showed my butt to everybody. But, it's a great story. And it just reminds me, like, take chances. It's not as bad as you think it's going to be. And it makes a killer story usually.
Dave, have you ever failed spectacularly publicly with music or somewhere else where you had to give yourself that pep talk in the moment?
So with music, I start from such a low base that like it's hard to say I haven't had that much experience playing out. So not really there, but I've spent most of my career on stage doing presentations, and I've definitely chunked it. I have face planted on stage going, doing the little jaunty run up the little set of stairs to the thing. I have full on face planted, water bottle, Rubik's Cube, notes, everything, just full on train wreck. And the partner I was presenting with, Matt Hogan at the time, looked over to me. He was already on stage. He looked down at me and he just went,
"Oh, you got slow clap. Awesome."
And I pulled myself together. But, the audience did the same thing. And it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do here? And I just sort of left everything on the ground and I just stood up and I did this. And then we just started the presentation and I left all my crap on the ground.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. What is it about? Like, why do we need those public failing lessons? Those complete, like, I didn't die lessons. Why? I feel like everybody needs those.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think because we're so trapped in the ego loop of, our importance and the fact that we matter and the fact that we exist and all these lies we tell ourselves about how the world is paying attention to us when in fact, most of the time we don't exist for anybody but ourselves. I think we have to be reminded of that over and over and over again until you get some level of it internalized. I think most people never do. But I think the act of performing in some capacity is phenomenal precisely for those things. A lot of people I know perform because they like the ego boost. I think the value comes from the opposite. I think good performers understand the ego dissolution that comes from being on stage.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that, Angie?
I think there's like a cognitive disconnect for a lot of folks, especially if they haven't done any performing before. They assume that the reason that the person who is on stage doing a good job at the show is because they're perfect and that they've rehearsed to perfection and that person doesn't screw up. Whereas like they don't see all of the outtakes and the stumbles and the falls and the missteps and the...
And they didn't see last night's performance, which was a dog.
Yeah. Right. Or like, I'm sure by now everybody's seen that clip of Beyonce literally singing into a microphone, like somebody's getting fired when the lights didn't go off on cue. Like this stuff happens to the biggest performers in the world. Why do I have to get all up in my head and make it mean something other than, well, that was a mistake. Let's try and make the rest of the show better.
Well, I feel like this ties back to the karaoke thing. And Dave, I'm thinking about like what you were saying about just being willing to get up there, creating these like safe spaces where you can get up there and just completely, it's not even fail publicly. I don't even want to use the word fail. It's actually like taking failure away from the act of failing. Like I need to take that label failure off of the act. Yes, it's bombing. Yes, it's whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But we need to strip that away. Angie, I think you want to react to this. Go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think it would probably surprise you to find out that some of the, I would use karaoke sometimes to practice for auditions that I had coming up, just to make sure that I could sing the songs and sing it in front of a crowd. But I would still get nervous because of that note perfection thing. So I distinctly remember singing Alone by Heart, which is already an intimidating song. If anybody ever compares me to Ann Wilson, I will instantly die of happiness. I sat in a corner with the mic hiding from people while I sang that song because I just don't look at me. Don't look at me. I'm here singing. Don't look at me. And so it was kind of bewildering to watch people walk in and kind of, where is that coming
Where
from?
is the voice coming from?
I've gotten in my head like that. I've fallen down. I've gotten super dramatic on performances too, like a slow, moody song. I had a cuddle puddle on stage. People just came up and we were all like sitting on stage swaying while I sang. So I don't know where I was going with that. I feel like there was an observation, but
No, I think this idea of like removing that risk from it. I don't.
oh,
I think if you're not in this type of environment or finding these environments to put yourself into,
mhm.
you lose out on this experience of what Dave, like what you just said about like that ego disillusionment, not the ego trip of like back to like, David Lee Roth or whatever, or other people expecting you to be David Lee Roth. Be like, no,
Mhm.
no,
I
it's
think
me.
some people get this from sporting events. Like I know a lot of, I used to be a sort of more significant runner and triathlete. And a lot of, that's one of those things where it's like, if you're going to go run triathlons, unless you're extraordinary, you're not competing, right? The only person you're competing with is yourself. And generally it's just to see whether you can get away with it, like whether your body will let you do the thing. I
Today.
think that's one of the places where people push themselves and sort of fail in a safe way. But boy, it does seem like there are not a lot of places left in the world where you can create those safe spaces, where you can find those safe spaces to really take some risks and just chunk it. And I think that's a shame. Like even video games, which is supposed to just be complete escapist entertainment. I just see, again, my son's generation, so many of them are hooked on the competitive nature of where are they in the leaderboards. And, even like, I want to be a pro gamer, I want to be a streamer. Again, the money connection shows up again, as opposed to just being like, no, sometimes you throw yourself against something and you fail for 2 hours and you learn something from that too.
Mhm.
I burned a lot of life on the Skate or Die 2 half pipe, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't translated into anything yet.
I'm sure you learned some valuable lessons.
Life changing, mind
Life
altering.
changing.
Yes.
I got some notes here on this conversation. There's a lot in this. I know this main. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't feel this way, but there's a lot going on in here. Angie, we started out at the beginning. You brought up the own your own story. You talked about your great undoing, and I wrote down it's kind of going from who others expect us to be to who we actually are, which really connects to Dave's point at the end. Like this is that ego dissolution thing. Who others expect of me is me showing up on stage and wanting to be the rock star already because you think that's what the others are expecting. But like the real thing we're looking for is this transcendent experience with this thing. Dave, you talked about at that young Dubliner show with your wife, which is you married well because you got to go to a young Dubliner show and experience it. But B, she married well because you protected well. This getting to people like in their scene that will protect the scene, the smaller, the cooler it is. You and I are thinking about this a lot lately. We've talked about this offline too. Dave, for the people watching this who don't know, Angie, we're gonna have to send you one. Dave's been making these like old school hand done zines, like I'm going to Kinko's and making copies style. But it's this idea of like these really small acts that aren't tied to monetization or some big, bold, crazy goal. Just do something because it's friggin' cool. People protect small things when they feel ownership of it. That's a really, really special idea. We talked about this idea of, and Dave, this was your term, like being close, being on the fringe of making something. Like I don't have to be the artist creating the new song to have the experience of just going like, no, I'm just down to do this. Like I'm just down to recreate this for my room, for my people in this thing and being happy on that fringe. Not that you need to be satisfied with only ever being on the fringe of something, but being aware of how much fun it is. You can get that close without ever having to be David Lee Roth. You can also get that close to saying no to Hotel California. And Angie, the quote of this podcast is very likely, like crack sticks to Velcro. I mean, that's some
Usually
Emily
when I tell
Dickinson
the
stuff.
story, I say a slightly more spicy word that starts with S, like stuff that sticks to Velcro. But
I don't know. I actually, I like that. There's some double entendre perhaps in there. It's fantastic. Dave, you brought up the good experiences of learning and deconstructing things you love. I think that's actually a lost art too. I think of all the times I spent. I remember finding out you could get one of those cassettes that like slowed the audio down and you could tune the guitar down. And I was like, I didn't have enough money to buy one of those. But I thought I could be so much better if I only had one of those cassette decks. I could slow this tape down. The idea, purist or improv, and Angie, I think you raised the question first, but this idea of, am I going to be a purist who's going to do something note for note and in the exact way, or am I going to kind of be loose around it? And you don't have to copy, but you actually have to have fun. So if you're going to do it to have fun with it, because that's the interaction between you and the crowd. I also noted I do have to go find that Candy Cane song, so don't think I missed that one. Dave, your poetic moment of the episode by far, asymptotic inebriation level, which that sounds like a garage band name. That was fantastic. The wedding story. Anything you make in public is co-created. Like, stop, put brackets around that. Anything you make in public is co-created with the people. Angie, you added to that the energy management, the crowd plus the performer aspect that goes into that. That's huge, because then as you brought it back, both of you, Dave, we talked about awareness and that the humility of saying like, I'm probably the worst person in this room. I'm going to start from that place. Angie, you coming and going like, no, I'm probably one of the better people in this room. I'm going to start from that place. But if both people know the other one is in the room, like, I'm probably the worst in this room, but somebody who's good is going to care and carry me through this thing, and we're going to have a good time. Like, if I can be bad and still give the great player a good time, and the good player can say like, I'm good, but I'm still going to make sure everybody else has a good time. Those are the best jam sessions I've ever been in. Dave, collaborative creating versus competitive creating. You got to do it so that everybody wins. You also brought up, I mean, just find the karaoke moments. Both of you shared the stories. Like, I'm not a karaoke person. I had an old friend say, we got to go out for karaoke. Him and his wife, my wife and I, we go out, and I'm just like, this is weird. This is not my thing at all. But I'm entranced by all the people who are out here at this crazy dive bar doing it. I don't think I thought of it from that perspective of like, you actually have to create this safe failure space. And so many people aren't going to go pick up an instrument and find it. And this point, and if nothing else, is the biggest point of this whole conversation. You have to create that space. You have to create it in your life. You have to create it for sake of your creative work. You have to create it for sake of your work. And you have to find it and you have to give it to others, whether that's the kids, whether that's people in your life, whether that's people on their professional journey around you. You have to remember, and I'm going to connect this back to the mosh pit rules at the beginning. You got to remember that you let people in if they want to get in. You let people out if you want to get out, and you pick them up if they fall down. And the tush thing, when you fall over, head over heels, they picked you up and you picked yourself up. And you kind of had to pick yourself up before they picked you up, but everybody was in on the rules. Dave, when you said the ego dissolution thing, and whether you're getting up just for you or you're getting up to actually dissolve ego and connect with the room, that's you saying like, let me in. I want to do this thing, but now everybody else is going to pick me up together. These are some beautiful lessons, you two. I love this so much.
Build that. That makes it sound so smart.
Yeah. We didn't even rehearse this. I promise.
We didn't even rehearse this. Angie Colee, please tell the people where they can find your stuff. I know more people are going to want to find you after this.
Awesome. If you want to learn more about the pro stuff, the marketing stuff, angiecolee.com, ANGIECOLEE.com. That's where I have all of the professional credentials. And look at all of the money I've made for people. If you want to learn about the mission that's close to my heart, that's Permission to Kick Ass, where I really work with people who are on the creative side of things to help them develop their business skills and help them find simple ways to succeed on their own terms without putting on a freaking blazer. That is permissiontokickass.com. I also have a podcast by the same name, Permission to Kick Ass. I would love it if you check it out. Send me a note if you do.
Send her a note. That's the way. Hold on. I got to say this. That's the way I got to know Angie, because I listened to a podcast after a friend said it, and I was like, this is friggin' great. And hey, you know, she's got a book too. I think this is an old copy. You know I have one. We got bookmarks.
Oh, that just made my day. This is such a great day.
Good. We're having fun. Dave, tell the people where they can find you.
I'm easy, just nadig.com, nadig.com. Points currently to my Substack, but that's a forever address. So anything I'm doing will always get linked from there.
Fantastic. I want to thank you both for doing this. We call these Just Press Record because this is what this is supposed to be about. Thank you so much. Everybody go follow Dave, go follow Angie. We're out. Thanks for joining us. Like, comment, and hey, subscribe below to Cultish Creative on YouTube if you haven't already. As the good compliance people want me to remind you, Matt Ziegler, that's me, is a managing director at Sunpoint Investments. The opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Sunpoint Investments. No information on this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of clients of Sunpoint Investments. I hope you've been entertained. I hope you found this useful. I hope you talk to a professional before you try any of this stuff at home. And most of all, I hope you've subscribed. Be nice to each other out there. And don't forget, head over to cultishcreative.com and let's make curiosity a habit together. And I'm out.